Elevator Music, a short story by Jared McGee. The cliche of a celebrity's life would have come as quite a welcome experience for Ruth Ann. What was it, just 11 years ago, that she could turn on any radio station in the USA and hear her song? Then again, just 11 years is wrong too. That was a lifetime ago. Ruth Ann didn't have any vestiges of that other life. Yes, she had her song itself, one of many written for her band's debut album. Sliding Force's album Debutante's debut had sold far better than any other albums in the age of rising digital music mastery back in 2007, both in CD form and digital form. Radio DJs loved the poppy alternative rock with an edge of sexuality, and teenagers lapped it up. Save Me From Mediocrity was the song of the summer and somehow bridged the gap between the pop culture world and the counterculture kids. The tours had been wild. The merch had flown off both the website and the tables at their shows. Sliding Force had graced the usual parade of badass magazines. There were parties and booze and boys and men and girls and women and drugs. Though Ruth Ann never touched the latter most of those. She indulged in everything but the drugs. Younger her had at least had the forethought to draw at least one line somewhere. The rest? She had indulged with the best of them. Still, what she wouldn't give for a VH1 behind the music cheesy story of how she partied into oblivion only to come back in some inspiring boomerang from the jaws of a deadly sinful life. No. Her life story didn't work out that way. Ruth Ann had indulged in the rock star life amid her sudden success. However, she didn't indulge to the point of losing herself of the drive to do better and be better as an artist and entertainer. She worked hard at her craft and felt pretty good about the direction that she and the guys in the band were going. What she didn't expect was that the accountants and the lawyers and agents and the businessmen are far more dangerous to a successful young musician than booze or sex or drugs could ever be. Despite being the toast of every town that mattered for the better part of 2 straight years off of their album, Sliding Force found themselves just under $900,000 in debt to the Artist Star Records company late in 2009. This made no sense to them, but the company's army of accountants and lawyers and agents and businessmen were more than happy to lend a helping hand in many an hour to assist the band in understanding that figure. They billed Ruth Ann and the boys for that time, too. Talk about adding insult to injury. Cliches are cliches for a reason, her old English teacher used to tell her. So, Sliding Force began to write more songs, hoping they could dig themselves out with another hit. But the company wasn't going to release a second album without some, as they called them, assurances. The band was forced to sign over all the rights but those to Save Me From Mediocrity. They released a second album under extreme duress and, despite it making a decent amount of money, every dime went to the company, ensuring that Ruth Ann and the boys in the band were still destitute. They toured on the second album, again, with every bit of the money going back to Artist Star. After everything was said and done, Sliding Force broke even. The company offered a third record, but the band was done. This experience had stripped them of any desire to create together, particularly for these people. A couple of the guys had drug problems. By this point, all of the guys had kids at various places across the country too. None of them had any clue what they wanted to do with their lives, including Ruth Ann, but they could all agree on one thing. They were done with Artist Star Records. They briefly entertained the idea of trying to release on an indie label, but they just didn't have the fight in them after that harrowing experience they'd just been through. 2011 rolled around and they all went their separate ways. Ruth Ann did do some acoustic gigs with a good friend of hers that she'd met through Fire on Me, another band that had gone through a similar hell with their record company. But the two could barely scrape by, and the merch wasn't selling in the least. Fortunately, Sliding Force had retained all the rights and originals to Save Me From Mediocrity, which, as per their very first deal they'd signed, meant that Ruthann got something like 60 cents for every play and the boys split the remaining 40. There were far more complex equations for splitting the money on the digital streams, but that was beyond Ruthann. All she knew was that she was still getting decent checks from that one blessed song. Then, the letters from licensing companies came. Save Me From Mediocrity first became the lead song for a major motion picture with far too many explosions for Ruthann's taste. Next, the song started showing up in commercials as a key ingredient to the mini-narrative the company was trying to put forward to sell their products. Soon, the song was just the background and far from being featured. Ruthann couldn't help but feel like she was pimping out this beautiful song of rebellion and agency that was her most loved creation, her proudest piece of her life. And now, all these years later, standing in an elevator ascending to her room in the Albuquerque Convention Center, her stomach leapt and turned, not from the jolt and then zipping up of the elevator, but because of the slow, over-churned, calming faux piano music assaulting her ears. For the very first time, Ruthann heard Save Me From Mediocrity drifting through the world in Muzak form. The ultimate move away from the song's meaning and intention. She was here in New Mexico to be part of a Hits in the 2000s mini-concert series over the course of the next 3 days. It had been explained to her as a Comic-Con, but for 2000s music. She'd already seen a great many of her long-forgotten celebrity pals in the lobby and heading out for a night on the town. But this neutering of her most intimate emotions soured her on that idea. She would stay in tonight. The minibar was calling her name. As the elevator stopped and dinged, alerting Ruthann that she'd made it to her floor, she numbly walked out into the hall, looking for room 743, followed by the jazzy, tinkling sacrilege as it was pumped through the halls as well. Thank you for listening to Elevator Music. All noises and musical tracks in the background of the story are from freesound.org. The sounds and musical tracks are being used under CC 01.0 Universal Public Domain Dedication licenses. Coming up next, we have In Brief, or The Laws of Brevity. Stick around and ponder how those often throwaway moments turn out to be pretty impressively important. And don't worry, we'll be back in our next set of episodes in 2 weeks' time to rejoin Tilo for Ants of Fire, The Legend of Tilo.